I stared at my reflection in the cracked mirror of my tiny bathroom, barely recognizing the woman looking back at me. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my long curly black hair hung limp and tangled around my shoulders. 25 years old, and I looked like I'd lived twice that long. The pregnancy test sat on the edge of the sink, those two pink lines mocking me. Pregnant. My hands trembled as I gripped the counter. 3 weeks had passed since that night, the night my entire world collapsed. 3 weeks since I discovered what betrayal truly meant. I should back up. My story doesn't start there, though sometimes it feels like my life can be divided into before and after that evening. My name is Lucia Martinez, and for most of my adult life I've been invisible. My sister Sarah and I lost our parents when I was 19. A car accident that left us orphans and struggling. Sarah, 3 years older and already more capable, landed on her feet. She got her degree, found a good office job, moved into a nice apartment in the better part of the city. Me. I bounced between part-time jobs, living in a cramped studio apartment where the heat barely worked, and my landlord, Mr. Elvis, knocked on my door every month like clockwork, demanding rent I could barely scrape together. Sarah and I drifted apart after our parents died. At first I told myself it was natural, she was busy with her career, building her life. But the truth was harder to swallow. She'd simply moved on, leaving me behind like an embarrassing reminder of harder times. Being a lesbian in our conservative neighborhood added another layer of difficulty. Sarah never seemed bothered by it. She was confident, tall, striking with her short black hair and commanding presence. She could walk into any room and own it. I was different, slender, short, uncertain. I'd always been the weaker sister, the one who needed protecting. Coming out felt like painting another target on my back. Then I met Pamela. God, even thinking her name now makes my stomach turn. But back then, 3.5 years ago, she was everything. Pamela, with her short blonde hair, bright blue eyes that seemed to see right through me, and a smile that made me believe in possibility again. She worked at the coffee shop where I had one of my part-time gigs. I was 21, exhausted, barely holding it together when she started coming in every morning. She'd order a cappuccino and linger at the counter talking to me about books, music, dreams. "You're too pretty to look so sad," she said one morning, and I actually laughed, something I hadn't done in months. We started dating 2 weeks later. Pamela became my anchor, my safe harbor. After brutal shifts at my various jobs, I'd go to her apartment and she'd hold me while I cried about unpaid bills and Mr. Elvis's threats to evict me. She'd stroke my hair and promise me that everything would get better. "I'm going to take care of you," she whispered one night, and I believed her. 3 years together. 3 years of her promises. She said she didn't care that I was broke, that I worked 3 part-time jobs just to survive. He loved me, she said. He wanted to marry me. "I'm going to propose soon," she told me 6 months ago, her fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder as we lay tangled in her sheets. "I want to spend my life with you, Lucia. I want to give you everything you deserve." I cried happy tears that night. For the first time since my parents died, I felt like maybe I had a future worth looking forward to. I worked harder than ever after that. I applied to better positions, studied in whatever free time I had, pushed myself until I was running on fumes. And finally, I got it. A real office job with a decent salary. Not glamorous but stable. Something I could build on. I couldn't wait to tell Pamela. Our anniversary was coming up, 3.5 years together, and she'd been hinting that she had something special planned. I knew what that meant. The proposal. And I'd have my own good news to share. I could finally start contributing, being a real partner instead of the charity case I'd always felt like. The restaurant she chose was nicer than anywhere we'd been before. I wore my best dress, the only good one I owned, and actually styled my hair for once. My hands shook with nervous excitement as I walked through the door. Then I saw her. Pamela, looking beautiful as always, sitting at a table with wine already poured. And sitting across from her was Sarah. My sister, the one I hadn't seen in nearly 8 months, who never returned my calls, who'd made it clear she'd rather pretend I didn't exist. "Lucia." Pamela stood kissing my cheek. Her perfume was overwhelming. "Surprise. Look who I ran into." Sarah smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, little sister. Long time." I stood frozen, confusion washing over me. What are you doing here?" "I invited her," Pamela said smoothly, pulling out my chair. "We ran into each other last week and I thought, it's been so long since you two have seen each other. What better time for a reunion?" Something felt wrong. The way Pamela's hand lingered on Sarah's shoulder. The way Sarah looked at her, familiar, intimate. But I pushed the feeling down, convincing myself I was being paranoid. Sit, Pamela urged. Let's celebrate. The evening blurred after that. Wine kept appearing, glass after glass. I tried to pace myself. I wasn't much of a drinker, but Pamela kept refilling my glass, encouraging me to relax, to enjoy. To family, Sarah toasted, and something in her smile made my skin crawl. I wanted to tell Pamela about my new job, but the moment never felt right. Sarah dominated the conversation, talking about her success, her apartment, her life. Pamela hung on every word, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, touching Sarah's arm in ways that felt too familiar. Are you okay? I finally managed to ask Pamela when Sarah excused herself to the bathroom. My tongue felt thick, my vision slightly blurred. You seem different. I'm perfect, baby. He squeezed my hand. Just happy. Aren't you happy? I wanted to say no, that something felt terribly wrong, but the words wouldn't come. The room spun slightly. Later. I'm still not sure how much later. Pamela pressed a key card into my hand. Room 412, she whispered, her breath hot against my ear. Go wait for me. I have a surprise. Come with me, I mumbled, standing unsteadily. Everything felt distant, dreamlike. Wrong. I need to say goodbye to Sarah first, Pamela said. Go ahead. I'll be right up. I should have refused. Should have recognized that something was very, very wrong. But I was so tired, so dizzy, and the promise of lying down seemed like the only thing that made sense. The elevator ride is a blur in my memory. The hallway stretched endlessly. I fumbled with the key card, finally getting the door open. The room was nice, too nice for what we could usually afford. Another warning sign I was too impaired to notice. I collapsed onto the bed, my vision swimming. I'd wait for Pamela. She'd come and everything would make sense. She'd propose. I'd tell her about my job and we'd finally start our real life together. I heard the door open. Pamela. I mumbled, but the figure that approached the bed wasn't Pamela. It was larger. Masculine. Wrong. I tried to sit up, to scream, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Hands, rough, unfamiliar hands, grabbed me. No, I managed to whisper. Please no. What happened next I've tried so hard to forget. Vain. There. The complete helplessness as my body was violated in the most brutal way imaginable. I begged. Cried. Fought with what little strength I had. It didn't matter. When I woke the next morning I was alone. Blood stained the sheets. My body screamed with pain. My dress was torn, my underwear gone. And Pamela, the woman who promised to love me forever, was nowhere to be found. I don't remember getting dressed. Don't remember leaving the hotel. I only remember one thought pounding through my skull. I need Pamela. She'll help me. She'll explain what happened. I took a taxi I couldn't afford to her apartment, using the spare key she'd given me months ago. The apartment was quiet when I entered. Maybe she wasn't home. Maybe she was at the restaurant looking for me, worried, sick. Then I heard it, a soft moan from the bedroom. My feet moved on their own, carrying me down the hallway even as some part of me screamed to turn around, to leave, to not see what I somehow already knew was there. The bedroom door was cracked open. Pamela was in bed, her blonde hair spread across the pillow. But she wasn't alone. Sarah's hands tangled in that blonde hair as they kissed, deep and passionate. Pamela's fingers traced down my sister's body with practiced familiarity, the same way she'd touched me hundreds of times. Pamela. My voice came out broken, barely a whisper. They broke apart. For a moment we all froze. Then Pamela laughed. Actually laughed. Oh good, she said, not even bothering to cover herself. You're alive. Sarah was worried we might have given you too much. Too much. I repeated stupidly. Nothing made sense. Sarah sat up, shameless. The sedative in your wine, little sister. Had to make sure you'd cooperate. The room tilted. You drugged me. Well, we couldn't have you fighting off our little gift, Pamela said. She stretched languidly like she didn't have a care in the world. You're always so tense, Lucia. We thought you could use some loosening up. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. You set me up. You had someone, you let him rape you, Sarah finished casually. Come on, don't be so dramatic. You probably enjoyed it. God knows you're desperate enough for attention. How could you? Tears streamed down my face. Pamela, you said you loved me. You said. Oh, sweetie. Pamela's voice dripped with false sympathy. Did you really think I could love someone like you? You're pathetic. Poor weak clingy. You were never anything more than a convenient distraction. We've been together for 6 months, Sarah added, running her fingers through Pamela's hair possessively. Since before she even started planning your little anniversary dinner. This has been in the works for a while. 6 months. While Pamela promised me forever she'd been with my sister. While she held me and let me cry on her shoulder, she was planning my destruction. Why? The word barely made it past my lips. Sarah's expression hardened. Because you're an embarrassment. My pathetic failure of a sister, dragging down the family name with your poverty and your weakness. I wanted to teach you a lesson about your place in the world. And because it's fun, Pamela added with a shrug. Watching you fall apart is genuinely entertaining. You're so trusting, so desperate to be loved. It was almost too easy. They turned back to each other, kissing again, touching each other while I stood in the doorway, bleeding and broken, making it clear that I didn't even merit the dignity of waiting until I left. I ran. Out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the street. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, collapsing in an alley 3 blocks away. I vomited until there was nothing left, then curled into a ball on the filthy ground and sobbed. Everything I believed in, love, family, the possibility of happiness, shattered in those few terrible moments. I'd been used, betrayed, and violated by the people I trusted most. And for what? Entertainment. A lesson. Because I was weak and poor and foolish enough to believe that someone could actually love me. The next 3 weeks were mechanical. I went through the motions of living without actually being alive. I showed up for my first day at the new office job, the one I'd been so excited to tell Pamela about, and went through orientation in a fog. My supervisor, Mrs. Grace Park, kept asking if I was okay, and I kept nodding, lying through my teeth. I was not okay. I would never be okay again. I worked. I came home to my tiny apartment. Stared at the ceiling. Repeated. I didn't eat much. Couldn't stomach it. The weight fell off my already slender frame. Mr. Elvis knocked on my door for rent and I handed him cash without meeting his eyes. I blocked Pamela's number. Sarah's too, though she never tried to contact me anyway. I deleted all our photos, threw away everything that reminded me of her, tried to excise the past 3.5 years from my memory like a surgeon removing cancer. It didn't work. I still woke up gasping from nightmares. Sometimes about that night in the hotel room. Sometimes about finding them together. Sometimes both, blending into one endless horror. Then came the morning I threw up for the 3rd day in a row. At first I thought it was stress. Trauma. My body's way of processing what had happened. The pregnancy test said otherwise. I bought 3 more, convinced the first was wrong. They all showed the same result. Pregnant. From him. The stranger whose face I never saw, who'd been paid or coerced or just randomly selected to violate me while my girlfriend and sister orchestrated it all. I had a seed growing inside me from the worst night of my life. My first thought was abortion. Clear, simple, obvious. I found a clinic I could afford, barely, and made an appointment for the following week. But at the appointment after the exam, the doctor, a tired woman in her 50s, delivered news that made my blood run cold. Given the positioning and some scarring, she explained gently, removing the pregnancy would likely require a hysterectomy. Your uterus is, well, there are complications. It's not a simple procedure. I don't understand, I said numbly. Removing the fetus would mean removing your ability to ever have children. It's your choice, of course. But I wanted you to understand what you're deciding. I left without scheduling the procedure. Not because I wanted the baby, I didn't. How could I want anything that came from such violence? But the finality of it. Losing that option. Having that choice permanently stripped away. It felt like yet another violation. Another thing taken from me without my consent. Besides, I wasn't straight. I'd never planned on biological children anyway. Did it really matter if I couldn't have them? I told myself it didn't. I scheduled a follow-up appointment and went back to work. But something had shifted. Some small, traitorous part of me couldn't go through with it. Every time I tried to convince myself to just do it, get it over with, my hand would drift to my still flat stomach and I'd freeze. It wasn't the baby's fault. That thought kept circling through my head. None of this was the baby's fault. So I did nothing. Days turned into weeks. The nausea got worse. I lost more weight even as the small swell of my belly became noticeable. Mrs. Park started asking more pointed questions at work. Lucia, are you eating? You look pale. Are you sick? I'm fine, I lied. Always lying. Always pretending. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning. And I'd stopped caring whether I made it to shore. Mr. Elvis started making noise about evicting me. The apartment was a disaster. I barely had energy to work, let alone clean. Bills piled up. I was failing at the most basic tasks of survival. The only thing I did right was show up to work. It was my lifeline, the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. If I lost this job, I'd have nothing. So I dragged myself in every day, did my tasks with robotic efficiency, and left. One night, about 11 weeks into the pregnancy, I sat on my bathroom floor and laughed. Actually laughed, hysterical and broken. I'd survived losing my parents. Survived Sarah abandoning me. Survived poverty and loneliness and coming out in a world that didn't want me. But this might actually be what broke me. I was carrying the child of my rapist, abandoned by everyone I'd ever loved, barely keeping a roof over my head. What kind of mother could I possibly be? What kind of life could I offer a child when I couldn't even take care of myself? I'm sorry, I whispered to my stomach. I'm so sorry. You deserve better than me. The next day at work, everything came crashing down. I was in the middle of filing reports when the room started spinning. I grabbed the desk trying to steady myself, but my vision tunneled. Lucia. Someone's voice, distant and concerned. Then nothing.